In today's video, we are going to be discussing the costly mistake that most beginner investors make. That's why I wanted to make this video, because learning this early on in your investing career could quite literally save you millions of dollars later in life when you're looking to cash out those investments. Hi, I'm Erika. I'm a lawyer and I love talking all things personal finance. So let's dive in. The costly mistake that most beginner investors make is not investing in very low cost index funds. I'm going to explain what low cost means in terms of expense ratios and walk you through some scenarios so you can see the actual implications of not investing in index funds early on in your investing journey. Fun story, in 2008, Warren Buffett made a $1 million bet with a hedge fund manager that a low-cost S&P 500 index fund would outperform a collection of hedge funds over a 10-year period. He wanted to prove a point that the crazy high fees that hedge funds charge aren't worth it. And guess what? He won. Buffett's fund returned 7.1% on average annually over those 10 years, while the hedge funds only returned 2.2%. To explore this low-cost concept more, let's use the actual fund that Warren Buffett used to win this $1 million bet. If you go to the Vanguard mutual funds and scroll down to US stocks large cap, you'll see what he used. It's VFIAX, the 500 index Admiral shares, which offers exposure to 500 of the largest US companies, including Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Warren Buffett's own company. If you look at the expense ratio column, you'll see that the expense ratio for this fund is 0.04%. Expense ratio is a pretty easy formula. It's the total fund costs divided by the total fund assets. So the lower the expense ratio is, the better it is for you and me, because it means that less of our money is being used for operating expenses. The reason index funds have low expense ratios is because they are passively managed funds, which means that a computer is doing all of the work, as opposed to an actively managed fund where some hotshot fund manager on Wall Street getting paid a huge salary and their research analysts are doing the work. When I'm looking for a very low cost index fund, I really want to see an expense ratio of 0.03% or 0.04%. To break it into exact numbers, the low-cost index fund that Warren Buffett used has an expense ratio of 0.04%, meaning that for every $10,000 that you invest, you're being charged $4 per year for the operating expenses. Let's contrast that to one of the largest US mutual funds by assets under management, the Fidelity Contra Fund. It has an expense ratio of 0.81%, meaning that for every $10,000 that you invest, you're being charged $81 per year for operating expenses. I'm going to whip out my Excel sheet so I can show you just how insane the difference is between a 0.04% expense ratio and a 0.81% expense ratio in the long run. Just to simplify it, let's assume 8% growth year over year. You're investing $1,000 a month for 30 years. After 30 years, the value of your portfolio is $1.5 million. After 40 years, it's $3.5 million. And after 50 years, it's almost $8 million. Now let's see how those numbers are affected depending on the expense ratio. So to account for the 0.04% expense ratio of the low-cost index fund, we're going to adjust the annual return to be 7.96% instead of 8%. You'll see that after 30 years, it's still pretty close to the 1.5 million. You've only paid $12,000 in fees over those 30 years. Over 40 years, you've paid $40,000 in fees, and over 50 years, you've paid $120,000 in fees. Now, here's the shocking part. Let's see how much you'll end up spending in fees with the actively managed fund, which for our example, we're going to use the Fidelity Contra Fund. So to account for the 0.81% expense ratio, we're going to adjust the return to be 7.19% instead of 8%. After 30 years, you're making less than $1.3 million because you've spent over $225,000 on fees. After 40 years, you're spending over $700,000 on fees. And after 50 years, what should be worth close to $8 million is worth less than $6 million because you spent over $2 million on fees. $2 million versus the $120,000 on fees you would have spent if you had put your money into a low-cost index fund. And remember, they both have the same benchmark target that they're trying to achieve. So you're already putting yourself at a disadvantage by putting your money in the fund that charges the higher fees. And if you think those expenses are crazy, hedge funds in general charge even more for management fees. I hope this was eye-opening and showed you just how important it is to understand expense ratios from the beginning of your investing journey, because it could actually cost you millions of dollars later in life. If this was helpful or interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and leave me a comment below. And I will see you next Tuesday. Thanks for watching.